Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today. I appreciate every one of you. We appreciate every one of you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Today, we're going to be presenting our lunch and learn on developing a cybersecurity business plan. And some key people to mention: Tyson Choptain, VP of Broadview Networks; John Martinuck, our Information Security Officer here at Broadview Networks; and Peter Svoboda, Director of Engineering at LCM Security, a key partner of ours and a key partner in delivering our security services to the marketplace here in Manitoba. So a couple of housekeeping tips. Just a reminder that under the live reactions, attendees can raise your hand to ask a question or get our attention. We hope this to be a very interactive presentation, and we welcome any of your questions or thoughts. There is also a chat window where you can ask your questions, so please feel free to throw your notes or comments in there. And just a reminder, don't forget to unmute if you want to share an idea or ask a question, because by default, you are muted. So thank you very much. Just a review of the agenda today. I am going to share a little bit about introductions. Not everybody that's attending the event today is really very familiar with us, as some of you are our customers and some of you aren't. So I'm going to share a little bit around introductions. I'll share with you our security. We're going to be talking, about our security portfolio, because whether you're a small business or an enterprise business in the Manitoba market space, our security strategy and our security solutions are designed to help you achieve your goals. We're going to talk a lot about what security lifecycle management means, and that really drives or leads into how to develop that business plan that is your security plan. We do have a formula for that. It's been honed over a period of 20 plus years. So we've got a 3-step process to helping you address your security and make it a manageable goal and a manageable project for your team. We're going to provide you with some deliverable examples of what we do, and we hope to open up the floor for the last 15 minutes around questions and answers. So I'd like to start with a couple of introductions to some key people on our team. The first person is John Martinuck. John has a long history of working in the Manitoba marketplace. He has several certifications when it comes to security, and he came on board with us just over a year ago and is integral to our VISO program that we deliver. Peter Svoboda is Director of Engineering, and he is with our partner LCM. And I do want to take a moment to just chat a little bit about our partnership. For those of you who don't know, Broadview Network has a very skilled team of technical resources, including John on our bench and Tyson, whom some of you or many of you probably do know. But over the 14 years that I've been with the organization, we've developed a partner network organization, or a partner network, if you like. And LCM Security has been a part of our growth in the security market in this space. So Peter oversees the LCM SOC. He built the operations that is centered in Oakville, Ontario. And I think what I'd like to do, Peter, is hand it over to you at this point in time to take the presentation in the direction it needs to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nora, and welcome everyone. Okay, so yeah, cybersecurity business plan. I mean, that's really what drives all this. So you know, where organizations need to start looking at when you're trying to develop this strategy for cybersecurity within the organization. It ultimately needs to follow this life cycle approach. So you need to start off with some kind of a plan. It's gonna need to involve policy, processes, technology, and people at the end of the day. So it's this continuous life cycle. And we've been using this approach to guide organizations of all sizes to define all this, all these processes, the people that they need and the technology that they require to kind of drive all this. And it at the end of the day, it starts with having a cybersecurity plan, right? So historically, companies would, they'd buy products that they were on a webinar on, and it sounded like it was a good product to buy, and at the time, it seemed to have, met the needs of the organization. So you kind of buy these point products without really understanding the holistic view of what's required in an organization. So you may be positioning products without leaving these giant holes in your security program that you may not even be aware of. So that's really the challenge by going with that approach. And if you have a cybersecurity business plan, you will have an understanding of all the different technologies and all the gaps that exist in the environment, so that you can then start assigning budgets and a multi-year plan to how you want to address the all gaps over time, right? And at the end of that same cybersecurity plan will allow you to measure security against a budget and a risk tolerance for the organization. I mean, naturally, you're probably not going to be able to fill every single security gap there is, but some things may need to be just a tolerated risk at the end of the day. So, but you need to have all that information to make those decisions. And this document I'm talking about, this plan at the end of the day, it also provides a common language for IT departments to speak with a senior management as well. So, historically, once again, the IT department's really been responsible solely for security, right? But it can't be like that. You need senior management's involvement. IT has to talk with senior management and need to really have that common understanding of risks and share the responsibility of risk across the whole organization, really. So that's really what we're talking about, this lifecycle management approach and the whole cybersecurity business plan. And to build something like this really is a three-step process. You start off with doing an assessment. It can be against any industry recognized framework, really. For the purpose of today's discussion, we're going to mostly be talking about the assessments against the CIS framework, but we can do assessments against NIST or ISO or even PCI for that matter for the credit card industry. So at the end of the day, you want to start off with an assessment. You understand the security gaps. You start prioritizing remediation projects and assigning budgets to that over a multi-year period of time. So that's really the assessment phase one. After that, you can start moving into the remediation. And then finally, you move into maintaining that level of security that you've now achieved. So that's where I'll kind of talk a little bit about the managed services and how we can maybe help with that as well. So when we're talking about doing these assessments, you have this industry-backed framework that you're going to be assessing against. And when you're going through that framework, you want to be able to assign maturity ratings for all these controls that you're going to be assessing. It's not really as easy as saying, yes, I'm compliant, or no, I'm not compliant. There's a depth to that answer. And that depth, what it needs to encompass is, at the end of the day, things such as, do we have policies and procedures around how the organization is meeting this specific control? Is the organization aware that such policies and procedures exist, and are they being followed? Are there metrics available to show that they're working? Is there a process of continuous improvement? Those types of things, and then it gauges. The scale is used to gauge that maturity within the organization, and we use the common maturity model to do that. And that kind of forms some of the methodology behind the assessments. I'm going to break out for a second out of this presentation and show you kind of what can be expected for some of these deliverables when you go through an assessment. There's really three things that you'll have when you go through an assessment with us. The first one is a report of findings. The second one is more of a remediation worksheet document. It's an Excel spreadsheet. that's going to be able to be used by the people that are really driving remediation efforts, but it also has all sorts of dashboards and ways to present where you're at, in the whole journey. And then the third document is the remediation budget document. So usually when an organization go through an assessment, one of the common questions is how much is this going to cost, right? So we try to kind of assign some budgetary numbers to these various projects that come out of the assessment as gaps. And the combination of all these three documents will make sure that you have a good understanding of what your maturity rating score is, what the what the projects are that you need to undertake, what the priorities of those projects are, and then what is it going to cost. So give me 1 second. I do want to kind of go quickly on these kind of three documents here. So the first one is this report of findings, as I mentioned, right? I'm going to kind of skip through this. If anyone needs more details about any of this stuff, we can for sure go into more details about that later. So the first thing really is, explaining methodology, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be a list of findings that we have. So a little paragraph form summary of what all the gaps were that were found in the environment. And then probably what's most important for management is the overall security posture score, right? So this is once again on that scale from 0 to 5. How did the organization score? And scoring below a 1 is actually quite common, a lot more common than you can imagine, actually. Our present averages for 2021 was a 0.9. The averages for the year before that was a 0.5. So organizations are getting better, but it's still a problem, and this is part of the reason why so many organizations are still getting breached on a daily basis, right? So understanding what your present score is on that maturity rating scale between 0 and 5, how does that compare to other organizations? There's a little blurb about that on what the averages are, and then gives you a little breakdown as well. So there's the framework will define what types of categories we're going to be assessing the security against, and then you can kind of see at a visual level where the strengths and where the weaknesses are in here. That also maps to specific technologies that you either have or don't have in the environment. So it's kind of a unique view that is presented as part of this report as well. So not only will you understand what the actual gaps are, but then do you presently have the technologies to fill in those gaps or not, right? Or do you need to purchase additional technologies? These assessments are all vendor agnostic. We're just going to mention technologies that you need to fill in the gaps, and then which vendor you use is kind of up to you. And that's really everything, right? The rest is kind of a summary of everything that was conducted or collected throughout the whole process. So that's that executive style report. It's one of the deliverables. The second document is the Excel worksheet document. All right, so this one really is a very detailed document. As you can see at the bottom here, there's a number of tabs available. Really the most important things to mention, I'll probably start off here, it's kind of one of the middle tabs, but it kind of will allow you to understand this document a little bit easier. So I mentioned how, once we go through the assessment, we're going to give you an idea of the gaps, but we'll also start grouping those gaps into logical projects for you, so that at the end of the day, when you go through an assessment, you're not just going to have a laundry list of 80 controls that you need to make sure you're adherent to. Instead, you're going to have a list of maybe 10 projects that you need to do over X amount of time. That is ultimately then going to address those 80 controls that we're lacking. So we do some of this grouping and kind of analysis for you, and also prioritization as well. So we'll present you a list of these projects in a prioritized fashion, what's kind of the most important, and there's justifications why. There's a whole thing called implementation groups within the CIS framework that ultimately dictate how to prioritize certain things. So all this logic is built in to how we prioritize things into this implementation plan. There's a number of other pivot tables in here. I'm not going to go into too much details about this right now, but it basically just explains, how do we do this grouping for you? Which specific controls are being addressed? Where are the biggest gaps? Where did you score zeros on? Where did you score ones on? All that stuff is kind of available in all these other pivots in here. And then there's also a a dashboard page, which management loves to see this, right? So at the end of the assessment, you're really going to be, on this kind of first little bubble here, right? You're done the assessment. You haven't really done anything. You have this high level plan of projects, and this page here will allow you to keep track of your remediation progress. Everything is dynamically mapped to this roadmap tab here, which actually shows the details about how every single control was scored. Once again, using that 0 to 5 CMM methodology I spoke about earlier. So you can kind of, keep track of this as you remediate things. You have all sorts of columns available here. How does each control map to the specific projects we talked about, and little sub projects as well. So at the end of the day, as you have all the tools at your disposal to be able to leverage this document to then dynamically update a dashboard such as this to show how much the organization has progressed over time. And then really you want to set yourself a goal to work towards, right? So, in this example here is this blue line. Let's say you want to get to a 3.0 out of 5 within 2 years. That's a pretty reasonable expectation or a goal to set for yourself. To be somewhere between a 2 and a 3, to be honest, within a 2-year span of time. If you can achieve that, that's great. That's this blue line you're going to strive for. But then, quarter by quarter, you can keep track of your actual progress and get an understanding of how close you are on to meeting that goal that you've kind of set for yourself. So that's that second deliverable you'll have. The third one is really the how we can help document at the end of the day. It has budgetary numbers. In order for us to provide budgetary numbers, we have to start now pitching technologies ultimately that would solve some of the gaps. So this document is probably the first time you'll ever hear specific technologies mentioned, but it basically follows a very similar structure to what you saw in the Excel document. You're going to have all of your projects listed in this document, a brief description of what the project entails, what kind of solutions may need to be purchased, and then at the end of the day, the budget, right? The annual cost. Some things may be managed services, so there's going to be a recurring cost. Some things are one-time expenses. All this will be laid out for you in this document, so that you now have a prioritized list of projects. You have a way to keep track of risk scores, and you have budgets, right? So the combination of these three documents really is the cybersecurity business plan that we speak of. On that note, I'm going to come back to the presentation here. Second. Okay. So, so where do we leave off? The assessment, right? This 3-step process. So you go through an assessment. You have this cybersecurity business plan in front of you. You're now going to be enter phase 2 after that, right? You're going to start doing the remediation, and this can be, some of this stuff can be done in-house. Some of this stuff you may choose to outsource to us, to Broadview. At the end of the day, we do have solutions, end-to-end solutions for everything that the framework requires. So that's really step 2 is filling in these gaps. And then once you're kind of filled in this gap, or you've reached this level of maturity that you're comfortable with, you're going to now need to have ongoing processes around staying at that level of security you've achieved. And that's really where we start getting into some of the managed services stuff, where I will kind of go into more details as part of this next section. Okay. All right. So what you see here is a quarterly. This is kind of, I find this is the easiest way to allow people to easily understand what the managed services are all about, right? That this kind of, that's step 3. And this is an extract from a quarterly security review that we do for all of our managed service customers. We call it the QSR. And it's kind of a summary. We have a check-in call once a quarter with each organizations to provide them with that, once again, more of that business level view of what's actually being handled by the managed service. What are we doing? What are the types of things we've noticed throughout the quarter? What are some of the trends we're seeing? So that's really the QSR I'm talking about, and we'll go into some details in here. And really, this is a good summary of our managed services. So this is a sample table of contents. There can be more things on here. It can be less things. It all depends what's involved in the managed service. But there's always tickets associated with it, right? So there's going to be a whole help desk ticketing system that you'll have at your disposal if whenever we kind of notice anything happening in the environment. Let's say you're going with the security monitoring managed service, which would basically collect all security logs from all devices within your organization. So firewall logs, server logs, databases, applications, etc. And then we have a 24/7 team of analysts that basically analyze all that stuff. So if there is something we notice that's kind of anomalous in the network, we'll open up tickets. So as part of the quarterly review, we'll actually be reviewing those tickets to make sure things are closed off to your satisfaction, to make sure things are prioritized. Sometimes customers don't react in time to some of the tickets. So we sometimes need to give them a little nudge saying, hey, by the way, there's all these tickets. And by the way, there's some really high severity stuff that we're just not getting the attention that we need. So all that stuff gets discussed in the ticketing. Vulnerability assessments is basically if vulnerability scans are part of the managed service. So we can do internal scans, external scans, vulnerabilities. I'm going to touch on this a little bit more. We'll go into a few more detailed slides of what some of this stuff is just to give you a little bit more understanding of what are the types of information that we can see and provide for you. There's also PCI scanning, ASV scans, if you have any PCI requirements. A lot of these categories deal with firewall logs. So if you have web filtering, not necessarily firewall, it's usually done on the firewall these days, but it doesn't have to be. So we can integrate with any vendor really to collect web filtering and report on that, those types of logs. And the anomalies, as I mentioned, asset discovery. So if there's any new IPs all of a sudden being detected on your network, we have solutions for that. Intrusion prevention, anti-malware, obviously, app control, firewall activity, admin changes is huge. Section 12 here, right? This is all about large section of it, anyways, is Active Directory. There's some more examples on this coming. Bandwidth, like, is there a spike all of a sudden in bandwidth that someone might be exfiltrating information from the environment? Do we need to act on that? So we can take a look at that and show you that as well. File integrity monitoring, NTP, just making sure all the time servers are in sync, because that's really important as well. And when you're doing log management, is to make sure all the timestamps are in sync. We do provide dark web monitoring as well. So if there's any compromised accounts on the dark web, or if there's any activity, about your organization on the internet, maybe there's some information on sale about your environment, or maybe some confidential documents that someone stole, things like that are quite common actually. So providing a monitoring service is another thing we can offer. And then SSL certificates as well. So when do they expire? Because that's quite dangerous too if you let some certificates expire. So that's kind of a high level summary. I do want to touch on a little bit more on some of the more interesting pieces within one of these quarterly reports that we provide. One of them is this view here, right? The SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is quite unique because, by being so involved in your environment through these managed services offerings, we have a very good understanding of where your strengths and your weaknesses are, especially if you've done the assessment, right? The assessment is where we feed a lot of this information on, and then also combined with what the 24/7 security operations center team is seeing about the environment, will basically form this. So on a quarterly basis, we once again just reemphasize where some of the strengths are that we're seeing, but probably more importantly, where the weaknesses are and opportunities to improve things. And then obviously the threats as well, so the overall threat landscape, well, what are kind of the dangers today against specifically your environment, and how do these weaknesses correlate with the threats. We also provide one of these mission control slides, which is another fantastic, quick visual way to understand what is the managed service doing for you right now. And these are basically all the stuff we can do for you. And once again, just a visual format. Or do we have vulnerability assessments being done? Are there IPS logs? DLP, web application firewalls, whatever the case is, right? So it's a nice visual. Green means yes, red means no, yellow means in progress usually, or coming very soon, but not fully deployed yet. Then we obviously get key observations, what actually happened in the quarter. We jump into a few high-level things. I mentioned the ticket summaries. Our ticketing system is ITIL based, so we have all the different types of tickets, how many tickets were open, how many closed, how active was the quarter really, get kind of summarized. If we need to bring any items of attention or of concern to your attention, that happens here as well. Vulnerability scans, right? So this is probably an example of something you don't want to see. You don't want to see vulnerabilities going up. You want to see that threat surface really going down if you're actually patching properly. And vulnerability remediation or vulnerability assessments can make sure that your patch management is working at the end of the day and you don't have any vulnerabilities in the environment. It's extremely important actually, because if the attacker doesn't have anything to attack, then you won't get breached. So making sure that you don't have any vulnerabilities is very, very critical in this. So there's, we dedicate quite a bit of time to analyzing vulnerabilities in the environment. What are the most critical IP addresses with the most vulnerabilities? What are they? We provide you guidance on how you can remediate any of that stuff. Web filtering, we typically focus just on the security stuff. We could give you reports on who went to Facebook, but that's not really the intent, right? The whole offering is really security focused. So what do we really care about is the security risk categories, right? Proxy avoidance. Is someone trying to evade your security? Are there VPNs being opened from your environment? And, are there malicious websites or spam URLs, phishing, that kind of stuff, right? Who are the people going there? So all sorts of top users, top sources, top destination. Who's at risk? Who's really posing a risk to your organization? These are the things we bring to your attention. Admin changes, quite big as well, right? So as all the administrative changes that are happening in the environment, and who's making them. So who are the changes being made on which users? Active Directory does compose a lot of this, but it's not just that. It can be firewalls, it can be other authentication servers, applications, databases, right? So we analyze, who's making the changes, where are the changes being made to, what are those changes? If there's groups being modified, what are the groups? People getting added to domain admins, all that kind of stuff. High-level summary of what else is going on. Authentication failures. There's a whole section dedicated to this. Which ultimately looks for any brute force attacks, right? So, or a lot of times actually is misconfigurations also. Quite often we actually, we set up all this stuff and then once we start monitoring environments, everything lights up red for that first week or two that we're monitoring a custom for, because there's just misconfigurations. Maybe some account that of a user that left the organization 5 years ago, maybe there's some services that are still using that account and it's been deleted. So there's constant authentication failures going on. It's more common than you can imagine. Dark web monitoring, as well as I mentioned, right? Who's kind of being compromised in the environment or the credentials being leaked. Basically just want to raise awareness and for any kind of high risk users in your environment. And this slide here basically is kind of shifts gears slightly now. So everything you've seen for the last 20 slides or so was all about this quarterly security review that I mentioned, right? Which is a good summary of all the things we can do as a managed service. The next couple of slides is more talking about the team behind the scenes, what actually happens in our security operations center. So high level, the monitoring service, the security log monitoring service, uses a product called a SIM, SIEM, right? Security Incident and Event Management tool. It's really at the base. It's kind of it's a syslog server on steroids, I guess, right? It's a lot more than a syslog server, but that's what it is on the very core. And then it can correlate events from many different systems. It can generate reports and alerts and basically all that correlation. And so it's a product called a SIM, which is hosted in our data center in Quebec. All data residency, it's all in Canada. Our monitoring team is just based out of Toronto, or just on the outside of Toronto, a town called Oakville, if you're familiar with the area. And the data itself is housed in the data center in Quebec. So that's kind of the tool behind the scenes. There's also vulnerability scanning software that we use. Qualys is the product for that. So there's a number of different tools. But really, at the end of the day, all these logs and events get fed into our SOC team, where there's 3 tiers of analysts that kind of will review the reports, the alerts, all these events that are coming in. Usually the tier 1s do that first level analysis. If there's something that is of concern, they'll bring it up to our tier 2, which are the kind of the more senior guys on the team. And then there's also a tier 3, which we also refer to as a hunt team sometimes, or the incident response team as well. These guys are the most senior and most experienced folks on our team of analysts, and they get brought in when there is a high suspicion of an actual breach of some sort or a compromise. Or they actually run the hunt teams. So they'll actually process information such as threat feeds, indicators of compromise, and other things that really wouldn't generate any anomalies on any dashboards or any alerts or any of that nature. So they'll kind of constantly be nitpicking at all the stuff that looks normal to see if there are actually any abnormalities that's part of that. So that's really a kind of high level summary of the SOC team. Here, once again, it's a little bit expanded view of the whole team. I talked about the 3 tiers of analysts already, but there's also the CISO level, SOC director level, people that are part of running all this as well. Senior consultants as well. These are usually the people that will run the assessments. There's project management if there's any larger projects on the go that require a project manager. So we'll assign one of those. And then report writers, not to be discounted. These guys are really important as well, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be trying to paint the story back to you in a way you can understand it. So if there is an incident, what actually happened. So putting together all these logs and artifacts of vulnerability scan data, all the stuff that we're collecting, and then putting that together into a report if that's needed, right? So the other thing to keep in mind as I'm presenting this team is that if you sign up for a managed services, this becomes an extension of your team, right? A lot of organizations don't have the budgets to have a full-time CISO, Chief Information Security Officer on the team, right? So we can act as a part-time CISO, 24/7 analysts. Not many organizations can make sure you can monitor 24/7. So just that's another kind of thing to note is that as part of this managed service, really we become an extension of your team, and that's really the strength, because to undertake when you do that the whole cybersecurity business plan, you can probably expect quite a few things to come out of that, right? As gaps. So remediating everything is quite a bit of a task, right? Especially if you're setting yourself a constraint of maybe 2 years, 3 years to get there. So that's kind of how we can help, is actually bring in some of these team members. We do integrate into your incident response plan at the end of the day. So this is kind of a high-level incident response plan that we kind of we'll develop and send out as part of the onboarding, where it just talks about how we integrate with your team. But the real big point here to make is that we need to be part of your incident response plan and process, so that when there is an incident internally in your organization, we're authorized to be part of that incident response team that at the end of the day can provide you with reports and advice and guide you along this whole process. So we do integrate into your incident response plans. Quick note about some case studies, right? There's got kind of just 4 little ones I want to talk about here. The first 3 are kind of mostly all the same story, really. You know, going through a CIS assessment, you know, understanding the gaps, seeing that they're kind of short-staffed a bit, they need some help, and they'll go with some sort of managed services with us, right? So we have, you know, pharmaceutical companies, we have universities, we have retailers, you know, publishers. The interesting one is the last one here, Orion, actually, and I want to kind of single that one out because Orion is an organization that actually provides kind of research and managed services and infrastructure as well to universities and healthcare and stuff in Ontario. They're a not-for-profit, and they actually hired us to help them build out their SOC team, their Security Operations Center. So we actually ended up setting up a whole SIM for them and the processes required for it. And now they're basically running as their own managed services based on kind of the, you know, the setup and the initial configuration of their whole SOC to begin with. So it just kind of shows how, you know, we really know what we're doing. We've been doing this 20 years. So it's yeah, you know, expertise is on our side for sure. Really, the last slide here I wanted to talk about is the onboarding process. So this is a lot of times when you're kind of, you know, shopping around for managed services, this is the stuff that you know, either makes or breaks a managed service. If you don't do the onboarding properly, you're going to run into issues. So this has to be done right. And we've kind of we're constantly revamping this, making it better, improving it. But it's really years and years of experience that we bring to the table, and we'll do things like provide you with all the documents, such as, you know, what are the severity levels, how do you contact us, making sure that we understand how to contact you if there is an incident at 3 a.m. on Christmas. You know, who's gonna be taking that call, right? So you know, escalation paths. If one person isn't available, who's the next person we call, and we kind of make sure that our team is always able to get a hold of someone should there be a you know, a critical severity incident on the team. So we make sure communication is defined. Probably there's a number of things. There's a whole project that gets spun up, but potentially the most important thing is to make sure that we're covering all the devices that we're contracted to cover, right? So let's say we're doing vulnerability scans and the managed monitoring, security monitoring. So we want to make sure we're collecting logs from everything. Usually the way that works is that we'll define a list of devices that we need to monitor, and that's fine. You know, we work together to make sure all those devices are sending. And there's 2 verification steps that need to happen though. One is to make sure that we're actually receiving logs from every single one of those devices, which is kind of the easier of the 2. And then the second step, which is just as important, but not always done, for in other managed services, we kind of bump heads against sometimes in some of these scenarios, but is making sure that the right type of information is actually being sent, right? So going through the logs, making sure that all of the reports and the dashboards that we've configured, that they're all populating the right information from all these devices. For example, for Windows devices, there's all sorts of GPO settings that you need to enable for the right auditing to happen. Otherwise, the Windows devices, they'll never generate a log even. So if they're not generating a log, it's not going to get sent to our monitoring, and then, you know, we might miss events. So that's another thing that we do as part of the onboarding, is just to make sure that, you know, we're receiving logs from everything, and that the right type of information is received as well. Once all that's completed, you know, you basically have a rock solid managed service offering, and yeah, and you can hopefully sleep better at night. So with that, I'll probably hand it over back to Nora here.
Thanks so
just
much,
to wrap things
Peter.
up.
Perfect. I'm actually going to take a step back for a minute because, you know, your case studies were fabulous, But I want to emphasize that the enterprise experience that we have is really designed around the Manitoba marketplace. And one of the case studies there was Friesen's Publishing. We have manufacturers, we have school divisions, we have transportation companies, and we have engineering and architectural firms that are leveraging our portfolio of services in a number of different ways here in Manitoba. So we do extend from small businesses to enterprise-sized businesses, whatever your requirements are. This particular slide just illustrates the depth of the portfolio, and I'll let Tyson and John take that over.
Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. Thanks, Nora. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Yeah, just peeling a little bit back here as well about CIS. We've had previous presentations on CIS. I won't go through it in too much detail, but CIS really is a collection of global best practices. Those best practices are really what most assessments are based on and drive what you may select from a portfolio like this. There's many benefits to CIS, and Peter and I could talk to them for hours, but they're really at a starting point, really meant to be realistic and practical. So start with where you are. What do you have today? Start with your basic cyber hygiene. For example, in this portfolio, patching and antivirus really should be part of your basic cyber hygiene, but a lot of the big organizations are failing there. There's really kind of 5-6 key points I want to talk about in the portfolio. One of them, which we've also talked about in the past, is what are cyber insurers looking for? So it may be federal compliance requirements, it could be provincial, but from just a cyber insurer perspective, really we're consistently seeing them ask for 5 things. That's multi-factor, backups that are actually tested, removing or limiting publicly exposed services, not being an admin day-to-day, so no local administrators, and the people side. We can't forget about the people and process side, so providing users with training. There's been cases where if you're not meeting all 5 of those, right, your premium's tenfold or you're being declined. So we alluded to it earlier, right? Just throwing a bunch of technology at it without an assessment first or considering the people and process part of it really doesn't complete your journey. We can't just throw in a tool and set and forget, right? It's really about the remediation, measuring, validating all the good work we're doing to improve the security posture. Peter talked about incident response, right? So, how do you know there was an incident, right? The bad guys are sitting in environments for months, in some cases a year and a half, 2 years. So without some of these solutions, it's not just reacting to an incident, but how do you even know they're there? So that's really where some of the detection and monitoring pieces you see here come into play. Thirdly, layers of defense, right? Defense in depth is a bit of an older slogan, older idea, but it's really important, So in a perfect world, right, your server would be hardened, it would be monitored 24/7 while running advanced endpoint protection and being scanned for vulnerabilities on a regular basis. It's really a multi-layer approach. And whether it's the CIS type assessment or other frameworks, right? How do you prioritize those improvements? What should you do first in what quarter? Is that an engagement? Is that a project? And then where do these tools fit in? And again, not just about people process, but in CIS world, for example, in that maturity model and scoring system, you sure have every tool on this page. But if you don't have a process or policy, right, you're not scoring higher than a 2 out of 5. So those are really important to consider to bring all these items together. A couple other quick points about that, right? Just regular testing and review. It's one thing to score a 3, but let's measure that and validate it year after year and show that improvement over time. If you're able to automate some of the controls, you're looking at a 4 out of 5. If you're showing continuous effort and improvement, in some cases, rare, but in a lot of cases, that's going to be a 5 out of 5. Just a bit more about CIS, whether it's an assessment or some of the other tools, you can and we leverage other resources from CIS. So the benchmarks, for example, you can benchmark your 365 tenant. You can benchmark a Windows server. There's even build kits that can automatically apply these global best practices to systems. So leveraging CIS, not just from a assessment framework perspective, but tools to improve your posture, not just because it's a checklist off the internet, because it's best practice. All those are there and available to you as part of the portfolio and solution. And that covers on-premise systems, that covers cloud systems, one-offs. Generally, there's benchmarks and recommendations for them. Some of those are simple as, I've got a new 365 tenant. Well, what defaults should I change? Or, I'm starting to put some virtual machines in Azure. How should Azure be configured for a starting point? So yeah, this portfolio is fantastic and provides you with, that defense in depth, but it's really about culture and policies, right? Having policies and procedures drive the people, process, and technology to get you on that security improvement journey.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so from what's happening with John and our team at Broadview and Peter and the team at LCM, we do have Broadview Networks have a complete cybersecurity portfolio. From the assessment side to the remediation, long-term remediation roadmaps, the point solutions, if that's what someone's interested in getting started with, all of the real security solutions an organization needs, we have really from end to end. And so thanks everyone for attending. I'd like to open the floor up for questions.